The sound of that ringtone still echoes in my ears, sharp, ordinary, but somehow terrifying. I was standing by the kitchen counter, drying my hands after washing the dishes when my daughter-in-law, Emily's phone began to ring. It wasn't the ringtone that caught my attention. It was the way her face changed. One moment, she was humming softly while preparing dinner, and the next, the color drained from her face as if she had seen a ghost. The plate she was holding slipped from her fingers and shattered against the floor. "Emily," I called softly, confused by her frozen stare. She didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the glowing screen of her phone, wide, trembling, full of disbelief. My heart started to race when I saw what she was staring at. The name flashing on her phone wasn't just familiar. It was impossible. It said, "Michael calling, Michael. My son. My only child. The man we buried 6 years ago in a small Montana cemetery on a cold winter morning." For a moment I thought my heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I whispered, That's not funny, Emily. Who's doing this?" But Emily didn't move. Tears welled up in her eyes. Her lips quivered and she whispered, "It's his number. It's really his number." I snatched the phone from her trembling hand, my mind racing between disbelief and terror. The number on the screen was indeed Michael's, the same one we had tried calling endlessly after the accident, the same one that had gone permanently out of service. My knees felt weak. Before I could decide what to do, the call ended. Silence filled the room, but it was not peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, and full of ghosts. Emily burst into tears. "Why now?" she cried, clutching her chest. "Why after all these years?" I didn't have an answer. Michael had died in a car crash, or at least that's what we were told. 6 years ago, the police found a burned vehicle deep in the Montana woods. His wallet, his watch, and his wedding ring were found inside. The body was so badly burned they had to use dental records to confirm it was him. I had no reason to doubt them until now. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring out at the quiet fields surrounding our farmhouse, replaying every moment of that awful day 6 years ago. I remembered seeing his coffin lowered into the ground, the way Emily collapsed to her knees, screaming his name. I remembered the smell of smoke from the accident that still lingered in his clothes when they returned his belongings. But what if that wasn't Michael? The next morning, I woke to the sound of Emily's voice on the phone. She was whispering, pacing back and forth. When she noticed me standing in the hallway, she ended the call quickly. Her face was pale, her eyes red. I asked who she was talking to, but she shook her head and said it was just a friend. I didn't believe her. Later that day, she showed me the phone again. There were 3 missed calls, all from the same number. Michael's number. And then a text message appeared. "Emily, don't be afraid. I can explain everything." Emily dropped the phone as if it burned her skin. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might faint. I picked it up, staring at those words. The message looked real, the timestamp, the number, everything matched perfectly. "Mom," Emily whispered, her voice shaking. Do you think it could really be him?" I wanted to say no, to tell her it was some sick prank. But deep down, a small, dangerous part of me wanted to believe it could be true. That evening, Emily and I went to the local police station. The officer on duty, Sheriff Dawson, was the same man who had handled Michael's case years ago. When we showed him the phone and the messages, his expression darkened. He took the phone, examined it, and then said, "This number was deactivated years ago. Whoever is doing this knows your family well." He promised to look into it, but I could tell from his tone that he thought it was just some scammer. Emily, however, seemed convinced it was more than that. When we got home, she went straight to her room and locked the door. Hours passed. Around midnight, I heard her crying softly, her voice trembling as she whispered into her phone. I pressed my ear against the door and heard her say, "Michael, is it really you?" My entire body went cold. I banged on the door, but she didn't answer. When she finally came out, her eyes were red and puffy. I demanded to know what was happening. She hesitated for a long time before finally whispering, "He's alive. He told me everything. He said he had to disappear for our safety." I felt dizzy. "That's impossible," I snapped. "We buried him. The police confirmed it." But she shook her head and whispered, "He said the police were part of it." I stared at her, not sure if she had lost her mind or if something far darker was happening. I asked her to show me the messages, but she said she deleted them because they weren't safe. That night I couldn't stop thinking about her words. The police were part of it. The next morning I noticed a car parked across from our farmhouse, dark, tinted windows, engine off. It was there for hours. Every time I glanced out the window it hadn't moved. When I stepped outside it drove away. I told Emily, but she brushed it off, saying I was just paranoid. Yet her hands trembled the entire time she said it. Later that night, I heard the sound of gravel crunching outside. I peeked through the curtain. The same dark car had returned. My heart pounded as I saw a figure step out and place something by our porch before driving away again. I grabbed a flashlight and rushed outside. There, lying on the porch, was a small envelope. Inside was an old photograph, one I hadn't seen in years. It was a picture of Michael holding Emily and their newborn baby, taken just days before he supposedly died. On the back of the photo, written in Michael's handwriting, were the words, "Mom, don't trust anyone. I'll come for you soon." My breath hitched. My legs felt weak. The night air turned ice cold. I stumbled back into the house, clutching the photo, and called Emily. She ran out of her room, and when I showed her the picture, she dropped to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. That's when I saw something strange. A small tattoo on the back of the photo, half smudged but still readable. It was a symbol I recognized, the same one that had been on the ring Michael wore when he joined his company years ago. A company that had shut down after his death. Something wasn't right. And before I could make sense of it, Emily's phone rang again. The same number. She stared at it, her lips trembling. I grabbed her hand, and before she could answer, I pressed the speaker button. A man's voice came through. Calm, deep, hauntingly familiar. "Mom, it's me." I froze. My vision blurred. Emily gasped. It was Michael's voice. He was alive. And then just before the call ended, he whispered one chilling sentence that made my blood run cold. "They're coming for you next." My heart slammed against my chest so hard it hurt. The phone slipped from my trembling fingers and hit the floor with a loud thud. Emily screamed and covered her mouth, her body shaking uncontrollably. For a few seconds, all I could hear was the faint echo of Michael's words replaying in my head. "They're coming for you next." I picked up the phone again, but the call had already ended. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. "Emily, did you hear that?" It was Michael. It was his voice. I whispered, almost too scared to believe my own words. She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "He sounded scared, Mom. Really scared." We didn't sleep that night. We sat together in the living room, the phone between us, waiting for it to ring again. The shadows outside seemed to move on their own, every creak of the old house making us jump. Around 2 a.m. there was a faint tapping on the window. My heart nearly stopped. Emily clutched my arm tightly, and we both turned toward the sound. When I gathered the courage to peek through the curtain, there was no one there. Just the vast empty darkness of the Montana night. But when I looked down, I saw muddy footprints by the porch, fresh ones, leading up to the window and back into the woods. The next morning I found Emily sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone. Her hands were trembling as she whispered, "Mom, he sent a video." I froze. "What video?" She turned the screen toward me. The video was shaky, filmed in low light. The camera panned across a dimly lit room. Bare walls, flickering lights, and a man sitting in the corner. His face was bruised, his beard grown out, but there was no mistaking him. It was Michael. My son. "Emily," he whispered in the video, his voice cracked and weak. "If you're seeing this, it means I finally found a way to reach you. They think I'm dead, but I escaped. Please don't trust the sheriff. He's part of it." Then the video cut to static. I felt the room spinning around me. Sheriff Dawson, the same man who told us years ago that Michael's body had been identified, the same man who took his wallet and ring from that car, was part of it. But what exactly was it? Emily burst into tears. "He's alive, Mom. He's alive. We have to find him." But before I could even respond, the sound of tires crunching outside made us both freeze. A black SUV pulled up in front of the house, the same one I had seen watching our place the day before. My blood ran cold. 2 men stepped out, both wearing black coats and dark sunglasses, even though it was early morning. They looked official, but something about them felt wrong. One of them knocked on the door, firm and controlled. Mrs. Carter, the taller one called. We need to ask you a few questions about your son's case. Emily shook her head frantically. Don't open it, Mom. Please don't. But I had already stepped forward. Who are you? I shouted through the door. FBI, the man replied calmly, flashing what looked like a badge. But when I looked closer through the peephole, something about it seemed off. The seal was slightly faded, the text misaligned. I'd seen enough crime shows to know that a real badge didn't look like that. I'm calling Sheriff Dawson, I said. There was a pause, then one of the men replied coldly, That won't be necessary, ma'am. That was the moment I knew Michael was right. I grabbed Emily's arm and pulled her toward the back door. We're leaving. Now. We ran through the kitchen, out the back, and into the woods behind the house. I could hear footsteps chasing us. Heavy, fast, getting closer. We ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like they were on fire. Finally, we reached an old hunting cabin that used to belong to my husband before he passed. We hid inside, gasping for air, listening. The forest was eerily silent, but every branch that cracked outside made us flinch. Emily sat on the floor, crying quietly. Mom, what do they want from us? I shook my head. I don't know. But if Michael's right, it's something big. Hours passed before we finally dared to turn on the phone again. There was another message waiting, this time an audio clip. Michael's voice came through again, urgent, whispering fast. Mom, Emily. If you got my last message, listen carefully. They're tracking your phones. Leave the house. Don't go to the police. There's a USB drive hidden in Dad's old cabin, under the floorboard by the fireplace. It has everything they tried to hide. That's why they faked my death. Emily gasped. He's talking about this cabin. I scrambled to the fireplace, dropping to my knees and pulling at the old wooden boards beneath it. Dust filled the air, and my hands trembled as I pried one loose. Beneath it was a small metal box, rusted and cold. Inside, wrapped in a piece of cloth, was a USB drive, old, scratched, but intact. Emily plugged it into her laptop, her hands shaking. Folders popped up. Hundreds of files, documents, photos, and videos. Most were encrypted, but one opened immediately. It was a video from 6 years ago. The timestamp showed the night before Michael's supposed accident. He was sitting in his office, looking nervous, speaking directly to the camera. If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident. The company I work for, they're not who they say they are. They've been moving something illegal through the lab. I found out too much. If I disappear, promise me you'll protect Emily and Mom. Don't trust anyone. Especially the sheriff. Emily covered her mouth, sobbing. I stared at the screen, feeling as though the ground had been ripped out from beneath me. Everything we believed, the accident, the funeral, the years of mourning, had all been a lie. Suddenly, the door of the cabin creaked. Both of us froze. Someone was outside. I turned off the laptop and motioned for Emily to stay silent. We could hear footsteps circling the cabin, slow, deliberate. The doorknob turned. I grabbed a fireplace poker, holding it tight, my hands slick with sweat. Then a man's voice spoke softly through the door. Mom, it's me. My heart stopped. It was Michael's voice. The same voice we'd heard over the phone, but clearer, closer, almost gentle. Emily gasped and ran toward the door. Michael, she cried, reaching for the handle. Wait, I whispered, pulling her back. It could be a trap. But before I could stop her, she flung the door open. And standing there in the pale light of the fading sun, was a man with a beard, dirt on his face and tears in his eyes. Mom, Emily, he whispered, stepping forward. It's really me. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to believe it. Every part of me screamed to run to him to hold my son again. But as he stepped into the cabin, I noticed something strange. His eyes, once blue, now looked a shade darker. His voice trembled, yes, but not from emotion. From control. And then I saw it, the small mark on his wrist. The same tattoo as the men who had come to our house earlier. Something inside me broke. This wasn't my son. This was someone pretending to be him. Before I could say a word, Michael smiled faintly and said, You shouldn't have opened that box. And that's when I realized we had just walked straight into a trap. For a split second I couldn't move. The air inside the cabin turned thick, heavy, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Emily froze beside me, her face pale, her body trembling. The man who looked like Michael, who sounded like him, took another slow step forward. His smile was gentle, but his eyes were cold, calculating. "I missed you both so much," he said softly, his gaze darting toward the metal box near the fireplace. "You found it, didn't you?" Emily's voice broke as she whispered. "Michael, what's happening? Why are you acting like this?" He tilted his head slightly, his eyes darkening. "Emily, you shouldn't have looked inside that box. It wasn't meant for you." Something was off, deeply off. My instincts screamed at me that this wasn't my son. My real Michael had a small scar near his left eyebrow from when he fell off his bike at 12. I couldn't see it on this man's face. My heart pounded as I slowly stepped between him and Emily. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "You're not my son." The man's fake smile faltered, then disappeared entirely. "You shouldn't say that, Mom," he said quietly. "We've come too far for you to ruin it now." Before I could react, he lunged forward and grabbed Emily's wrist. She screamed, struggling to pull away, but his grip was strong, too strong. "Where's the USB?" he demanded, his voice now sharp and cold. "Tell me where it is." I grabbed the fireplace poker again and swung it with all my strength, striking his shoulder. He grunted and stumbled backward, releasing Emily. "Run!" I screamed. We dashed out of the cabin into the cold Montana night, branches whipping against our faces as we ran. Behind us, we could hear him yelling, crashing through the trees in pursuit. My heart was pounding so fast I could barely breathe. The woods felt endless and every shadow looked like a threat. After what felt like forever, we stumbled onto an old dirt road and saw the faint lights of a distant gas station. We ran toward it, desperate for safety. When we burst through the door, the clerk looked up in shock. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked. "Please," I gasped. "Call the police." He reached for the phone, but before he could dial, the door behind us opened again. The man, the one pretending to be Michael, stepped inside. His face was calm, expressionless, but his eyes burned with fury. "Mom," he said softly, his tone chilling. "You don't understand what you're doing." The clerk froze, looking between us in confusion. I grabbed a metal object off the counter. I didn't even know what it was, and threw it toward him. It missed, clattering across the floor, but it gave us enough time to run out the back door. We sprinted behind the gas station and hid behind an old dumpster. I held Emily close as she sobbed into my shoulder. "Mom, what's happening? Who is he? What do they want from us?" I didn't have answers, only a growing fear that we were in something much darker than we could imagine. We stayed hidden until we heard sirens in the distance, the real police this time. When we saw the flashing lights, we ran toward them, waving our arms. 2 officers stepped out, and I felt a brief sense of relief, until I saw one of them. It was Sheriff Dawson. His expression was unreadable as he looked at us, not the concerned face of someone helping victims, but the cold, calculating stare of someone assessing a problem. "What's going on here?" he asked evenly. I took a step back. "You know exactly what's going on," I shouted. "You lied about my son. You're part of this." Dawson's jaw tightened. "That's a serious accusation, ma'am." Emily held up her phone. "We have proof," she said, her voice breaking. "We have the USB." Before she could finish, Dawson nodded subtly to the other officer, who moved behind us. In that instant, I knew we'd made a terrible mistake. "Hand it over," Dawson said quietly. "For your own safety." My pulse raced. Emily shook her head. "No, you're not getting it." Dawson sighed, then reached into his coat. I was hoping we could do this the easy way. And that's when headlights suddenly flashed from the road. Another car pulled up fast, screeching to a halt. The door flung open, and a man stepped out, holding something metallic in his hand. "Get away from them," the man shouted. For a second, I thought my heart had stopped again. It was Michael, the real Michael. Even in the dim light, I could see the scar by his eyebrow, the one I had looked for earlier. His clothes were torn, his face bruised, but his eyes, those blue eyes, were the same ones I had known my entire life. Dawson turned toward him, his hand hovering near his weapon. "You shouldn't have come back, Michael," he said coldly. "You know how this ends." Michael took a step forward. "You tried to kill me once, Sheriff. You won't get a second chance." Everything happened at once. Dawson pulled out his gun and Michael fired first. The sound echoed across the quiet night, sending birds scattering from the trees. Dawson fell backward, his weapon dropping to the ground. The other officer ran for cover, but Michael fired again, hitting his leg. "Come on," he shouted, waving us toward the car. We ran, hearts pounding, adrenaline surging through every vein. As soon as we got inside, Michael sped off down the dirt road, tires kicking up clouds of dust. Emily was crying uncontrollably, clutching his arm. "Michael, oh my God, it's really you." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I didn't have a choice, Sam. They wanted me dead." I turned to him, my voice shaking. "Who are they, Michael? What's happening?" He glanced at me through the rearview mirror, his jaw tightening. "You'll understand soon, Mom. But first, we need to get somewhere safe." We drove for almost an hour through winding back roads until we reached an old, abandoned warehouse near the edge of town. Michael parked the car and turned off the engine. Inside, there were papers scattered across the floor, maps pinned to the walls, photographs connected by red string. It looked like he had been living there investigating something for years. "They called it Project Helix," he said, pacing the room. "The company I worked for wasn't just a tech lab. They were building biological weapons. Dawson and his men were on the payroll, covering up their operations. I found out and they tried to make it look like I died in that car crash." Emily sat down, trembling. "Oh my God, you've been hiding all this time?" He nodded. "I had to. If they knew I was alive, they'd come for you too." I stared at the floor, my heart breaking and swelling at the same time. My son alive, broken but alive. But before we could even process it all, there was a loud crash. The warehouse door flew open, and armed men in black stormed inside, shouting commands. "Down on the ground," one yelled. Michael grabbed my hand and Emily's, dragging us toward the back exit. Bullets shattered glass and echoed through the room as we ran. We ducked behind crates, trying to find another way out. "Go!" Michael shouted. "There's a tunnel behind the generator." Emily and I crawled through the darkness, the sound of gunfire growing louder behind us. I looked back just in time to see Michael fire one last shot before being tackled to the ground. "Michael!" I screamed. He looked at me, his face bloodied but calm, and mouthed one final word. "Run!" Tears blurred my vision as Emily pulled me into the tunnel. We crawled through the darkness, our hearts pounding, hearing footsteps getting closer and closer behind us. And then silence. When we finally emerged into the open field, dawn was breaking. The sky was pink and gold, peaceful. A cruel contrast to the chaos we had just escaped. Emily fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "Mom, they took him again." I knelt beside her, holding her close, my heart shattered into pieces. I looked back at the warehouse, smoke rising from it in the distance. Somewhere in that chaos my son was alive or maybe gone forever again. But deep down I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Because when I looked down at the ground beside us, I saw a small blood-stained USB drive lying in the dirt. Michael had left it for us. And it wasn't the same one we found before. This one had a label scratched into the side. 3 chilling words. Final truth. For a long moment I couldn't move. The early morning air was cold against my skin, yet I felt nothing. No wind, no breath, just the weight of that tiny USB drive in my trembling hand. Emily looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "Mom," she whispered. "What is it?" I turned the drive over, staring at the faint engraving scratched into the metal. Final truth. My heart clenched. Whatever Michael had left on this drive, it wasn't just evidence. It was personal. It was for me. "Come on," I said, helping Emily to her feet. "We need to find somewhere safe to see what's inside." We walked for miles through the empty Montana fields until we reached an old motel off the highway. It was one of those forgotten places. Flickering neon sign, cracked windows, and a manager who barely looked up when we paid in cash. Once inside the room, I locked the door, closed the curtains, and set Emily's laptop on the small table. With trembling hands, I inserted the USB. At first, it looked like nothing. Just one folder titled, "Read this first." Emily clicked it open. There was a single video file and a text document. I opened the text file first. The words on the screen made my throat tighten. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it out. Please don't cry. I chose this path to protect you and Emily. I found out what they were doing and who they really work for. The truth isn't just about the company or Dawson. It's bigger. Much bigger. Watch the video, but whatever you do, don't trust anyone who comes looking for you afterward. You'll understand why. My hand shook as I clicked the video. The screen flickered and then Michael's face appeared. He was sitting in what looked like the same warehouse, bruised, exhausted, but determined. "Mom," he began, his voice low, steady. "I don't have much time. I found files showing that the company, Arconova, wasn't developing technology for medicine like they claimed. They were creating something else. A neural tracking system that could monitor and control people remotely using biometric data. They wanted to sell it to governments, and to people who would use it for war." He paused, glancing off-screen. "When I tried to expose them, Dawson and his men came after me. I barely escaped the explosion. The man you buried wasn't me, it was one of their security officers. They switched the bodies before anyone could check. They faked everything." I covered my mouth, tears streaming down my face. Emily was sobbing silently beside me. Michael continued. "They'll never stop trying to silence anyone who knows. That's why I had to stay hidden. But I couldn't let you live in fear anymore. This drive holds everything. Names, transactions, recordings. It's enough to bring them down, if you're brave enough to use it." He leaned closer to the camera, his voice breaking. "Mom, I'm sorry for everything. For disappearing. For making you believe I was gone. But please, whatever happens, promise me you'll keep Emily safe. You're stronger than you think." He looked down for a moment, then back up. "If you hear from me again, it won't be through phones or messages. They can trace those. You'll know it's me if you find the word Haven. That's the code. I love you, Mom. I always have." The screen went black. For several minutes, neither Emily nor I spoke. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the motel's old air conditioner. I could feel my pulse in my throat, heavy and uneven. My son, the man I'd mourned for 6 years, had died again, but this time it wasn't an accident. He had sacrificed himself so we could live. Emily finally whispered. "What do we do now?" I wiped my tears and took a deep breath. "We finish what he started." We spent the next few hours going through the files. There were spreadsheets, secret communications, and videos of meetings, all implicating powerful people across the state and beyond. It was enough to make national news, but if we went to the wrong person, we could end up just like Michael. Then, a knock at the motel door made both of us freeze. 3 sharp knocks. Then silence. Emily looked at me, terrified. "Mom, what if it's them?" I quietly approached the door, peering through the peephole. A man stood outside, tall, wearing a hood, his face hidden in shadow. I held my breath, ready to call for help. But then I saw something in his hand. A folded piece of paper with one word written in red ink. Haven. My chest tightened. Michael's word. I unlocked the door slowly, heart racing. The man lowered his hood. He was young, no older than 30, with kind but exhausted eyes. "Mrs. Carter," he whispered. "Your son sent me. He told me to find you if anything happened." "Who are you?" I asked cautiously. "My name's Daniel," he said. "I worked with Michael before he disappeared. He saved my life once. He said if this day ever came, I'd need to protect you." He looked around nervously before continuing. "We don't have much time. They know you have the drive." My stomach dropped. "How?" "They traced your location the second you plugged it in," Daniel said grimly. "They're on their way here." Without thinking, I grabbed Emily's hand. "Then we need to go now." Daniel led us out the back of the motel to an old pickup truck parked behind the dumpsters. We drove off fast, dust kicking up behind us. As we sped down the highway, Daniel explained everything. How Arconova had infiltrated local law enforcement, how they controlled media and government channels, and how Michael had been collecting proof for years. "He trusted me to get the evidence to someone who could actually use it," Daniel said. "We need to get to Helena. There's a journalist there who's been investigating this company for months. If we get her the drive, she'll make it public. It's the only way to end this." The drive took hours, winding through back roads and mountain passes. We barely spoke, all of us lost in our thoughts. I kept glancing at Emily in the rearview mirror. Her face pale, eyes tired but fierce. She had her father's courage. As we neared Helena, Daniel slowed down suddenly. "We're being followed," he whispered. I looked back and saw headlights far behind us, 2 black SUVs closing in fast. My pulse spiked. "Hold on," Daniel shouted, pressing the gas pedal to the floor. The truck roared forward, tires screeching as we swerved around curves. The SUVs gained on us, one trying to cut us off. A gunshot shattered the rear window. Emily screamed and ducked. "Mom!" she cried. "Get down!" I shouted, pulling her closer. Daniel veered sharply onto a dirt trail that led into the woods. The SUVs followed, their engines growling like beasts. Branches whipped against the windshield, the entire truck rattling. Then, just as one of the SUVs tried to ram us, Daniel turned hard, sending it crashing into a tree. The explosion lit up the forest behind us. But the second SUV was still coming. We reached a narrow bridge over a river, old, wooden, half-broken. "It won't hold us," Daniel yelled. "It has to," I said. He gunned the engine. The truck roared across the bridge as it creaked and cracked beneath us. Halfway through, the wood began to give way. Daniel shouted for us to jump. "Now!" Emily and I leapt out just as the bridge collapsed. The truck and the SUV behind us plunging into the river below. Water splashed high into the air. And then there was silence. I crawled to the edge, coughing, trying to see through the mist. The truck was gone, swallowed by the river. "Daniel!" Emily screamed, but there was no answer. Only rushing water. We stayed there for what felt like forever, soaked, shaking, staring at the current. Finally, I looked down at my clenched fist. The USB drive was still there. We had lost everything. Our home, our safety, and the people we loved, but we still had the truth. A week later, the files from the drive made it to the journalist in Helena. She published everything. The story exploded across the country. Government corruption, illegal experiments, human rights violations. The company was dismantled, arrests were made, and the sheriff's name was exposed among the conspirators. Justice had come, but at a cost. Months later, I stood by the riverbank where we last saw Michael. Every day since that night I'd wondered if maybe somehow he survived again. Part of me hoped foolishly that one day he'd walk through the door just like before. As I turned to leave, I noticed something wedged between the rocks. A small rusted dog tag. I picked it up and froze. It was Michael's. His name engraved clearly, though the metal was worn. And behind it, scratched faintly into the surface, was a single word. Haven. A tear slipped down my cheek. I smiled through the pain. He was alive. Somewhere out there my son was still fighting. And this time I wouldn't be afraid. Because if they came for me again, they'd find something stronger than fear waiting for them. A mother who had already buried her son once, and wasn't planning to do it again.